This is If My People. Bible reading 219. Is that what it is? 214. A little off there, 214. This is Paul writing to Titus. Now, it starts off with the same kind of admonitions. Seems that what's going on in the early congregations, the early churches, the early congregations of believers, they are to be set apart, and they are to remain loving against with other peoples, other Jewish believers, who and other Jewish messianics who do not believe in this Messiah. But they are to be set apart from those who don't believe. Spend your time with those who believe. There's where your time, your money, your effort, your prayers, and most everything goes into. Okay? You can love your enemies from afar. You don't give them the same everything you do your loving brothers and sisters. We keep the Torah. He reminds the Torah again to them that the elder must be blameless. The deacons, whatever name you want to come up with, he reminds them of the same thing you heard in 1 Timothy. So they're having the same problem. So in other words, somebody's going around Paul and feeding some bad information to the congregations. And let's just read it and you can figure out who's doing it. It's talking about verse 10 in chapter 1. For there are many rebellious people, mere talkers, deceivers, especially those among the circumcision group. Now, who is that? Well, that's a good way of saying the Jewish believers. The Messianics who do not believe in the Messiah. Do not believe that God is with them. Do not believe in Satan. Do not believe in anything. Holy Spirit, Ruach, none of that. They're getting in. And if there's money involved, they're going to get involved. Just like today. If you want to figure out, well, how do you know what happened back then? Well, you know what? Things haven't changed since the Garden of Eden. Deception comes with a cost. So these circumcision groups, you must be circumcised. You take your little boy and you go there and you get his private parts, and 8 days after he's born, Yeshua's the one that came up with that Torah. And now he's moving it. He's advancing it on. He's made you a priest. He's made everybody that runs a family a priest of the family. He's moved on. He does not have a high priest, Caiaphas, or anybody in the temple. He doesn't have a temple anymore. You are the temple. He's moved on. And he's taking it to the next 10 layers up. And Yeshua is saying this through Paul. Because when you read that all what Paul's given you, all these Torah, all this 1,050 commands, all the new covenant that you're reading, a ton of it came from Paul, which came from, it didn't come on the road to Damascus and there was a computer chip come down and blast Paul in the head, and so he couldn't see, and he went blind. He went to Mount Sinai. He went to Mount El Jabal. He went to Saudi Arabia, and he was there for 3 years with Yeshua, and he's given you the authority, because right there in the introduction, Paul tells you just read it, kind of like, yeah, he spent some precious time, entrusted, preaching entrusted. So this is who's sneaking in, and Paul's having to say the same thing. No, wait a minute. And he says, I was this and I was that. So Paul tells you that he used to be right in amongst this group. He was the one that approved for Stephen's murder, not death, murder. Now at the time, Paul believed it was a righteous death, but it wasn't. It was cold-blooded murder, and Paul was there. So Paul ought to be able to comment on most anything, because he was one of the worst that ever existed. Then he about faced. He repented. So Paul's saying that they must be silenced because they are ruining whole households by teaching things they ought not to teach, and that the sake of dishonest gain. Now, notice that it says the word whole households. They're meeting in homes. As I've said over and over again, we were never meant to have any church building, ever to have church buildings all over the world. And the Mormon church was never to build a gigantic temple in every single state, 50. And they were never to build 50 more temples throughout the world, 100 temples, where Satan and Jesus can have a little place to live because they're brothers. Wow. There's so much lies out there. Chapter 2, Torah. You must teach what is in accord with sound doctrine. Teach. Now, what do we consider doctrine? Well, Bruce, what is the doctrine that you believe in? I'm reading it to you. It's called Torah. It's called New Covenant Torah. It's called the Ten Commandments. It's called the Greatest Commandment, which is 2. And that's doctrine. And it stands on its own. So why these churches have to come up with something, I can tell you why. Having been part of it for years, if you want to get a doctoral PhD, you want to have that degree so you can put it on the wall and you can show everybody that you could be called doctor. Dr. Bruce. And, hey, doctor. Hello, doctor. How are you, doctor? And how are you, doctor? I'm fine, doctor. How are you, doctor? That is so stupid. Just like my master's degrees I used to put on my wall, they're not there no more. So what? What this is all about has to do with simply to get a doctorate, you have to come up with something different than what someone else has come up with. And you have to put it in the form of a thesis. And you have to move that thesis to testing with empirical evidence. And you have to come up with stuff to get that empirical evidence, right, wrong, or indifferent. And then once it's of some kind of a value, you can get your PhD. Well, that changes the doctrine of the church that they're going to be teaching and standing up in the pulpit from. You get it? If you didn't have to have these stupid PhDs and go through the process, the earthly human traditions of men processing anyone, then you wouldn't have 30,000 different Christian denominations. That is such a sad, sad situation. Verse 6, similarly, more Torah. Encourage the young men to be self-controlled. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us. Teach slaves. Today, we use the word those in debt, to be subject to their masters, those that they owe the money to, in everything, to try to please them and not to talk back to them, including their bosses. If you don't like your boss, leave. And not to steal from them. If you got to steal, leave. But to show that they can be fully trusted so that in every way they will make teaching about Master, our Savior, attractive. Chapter 3, verse 1, Torah. Remind the people to be subject to rulers' authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good. And so, well, what is good? What is truth? People know what truth is, and people know what is good and what is bad. That's a stupid question. Pontius Pilate messed up there. Verse 2, to slander no one, to be peaceable, considerate, and to show true humility towards all men. That means everybody, this mankind. This, verse 8, Torah. This is a trustworthy saying, and I want you to stress these things so that those who have entrusted in Elohim may be careful to devote themselves to doing what is good. These things are excellent, profitable for everyone, but avoid foolish controversies, genealogies. There's that genealogy thing. Well, do you have any Jewish blood in you? Do you have this? I mean, what difference does it make? The only person on the face of the earth that it was important that he be of the tribe of Judah is Yeshua. Think about it. He's the only one. His DNA, somehow, it was a miracle. And he has a list of all the names of his family and where they come from and all the other Moab that got mixed in and all this, Yeshua was still born perfect DNA, and he sinned not. The rest of us, we're all contaminated. We're all damaged property. I mean, I remember saying that to a couple people several times. I didn't mean to hurt their feelings, but I did. I said, well, you're damaged goods. People got so mad. A few people got so mad at me they didn't want to talk to me again. I meant, and I think I made it clear, that I was damaged goods. We're all damaged goods. Uh-oh, do I have the COVID? Gee whiz. You notice how I told you want to avoid being COVID? Keep your hydrates going. Always keep your water going. If you're like a sponge, think of this. If you're like a sponge full of water and someone's wiping you across the table to clean the table and dirt gets on the sponge, it's easy to clean a sponge by just squeezing it and shaking it in water and filling it up with clean water again. You're that sponge. If you're a dry sponge and you wipe a dry sponge across the dirty tabletop, try to get the dirt out of it. It's ground in, and it's going to be very hard to get out. That's viruses. That's the whole thing about all the science about keeping healthy is to do everything kosher and to keep hydrated. And it's water. Sometimes it's not water, but most of the time it's water. Just telling you, there's your problems taken care of. Verse 10, warn a divisive person once. Now say it, listen to this. Warn them once. As a police officer, I used to teach them, if you say it once, and if not, put them under arrest. I don't know how many times I watched on television. Stop, 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 stop. Don't do this. Stop, stop. Put your hands up. Stop, stop. And 55 minutes later, they're still saying it. That is effeminate. You want to do the male thing? Here's the male thing. Warn someone once, and they don't do it, warn them a second time. That means you're coming after them. And then have nothing to do with them. Or, in law enforcement, take them down. Don't sit there and do the warning, warning, stop, stop, stop. That is the most worthless thing to watch on television. When I see that, I just want to put my foot through the television. This is just a bunch of mamby-pamby law enforcement. Now, it's totally falling apart, and nobody trusts them anymore either. Nobody means too many people, I just don't trust them anymore. And that is a pathetic situation. Justice system is just, without Torah. We have to live under Torah until Yeshua comes back. We're supposed to have our foot on it, not be under it. We're not under the law. We are on the law. Paul was 100% right, Christians. Paul was 100% right, Hebrew roots. And I don't say anything about the Messianics and the Jewish people because they don't listen to Paul. They don't even listen to their Yahweh. Verse 14, the last part of his letter. Our people must learn, and this is Torah, our people must learn to devote themselves to doing what is good in order that they may provide for daily necessities and not live unproductive lives. Verse 15, everyone with me sends you greetings. Greet those who love us in the faith. Grace be with all of you. All this, and then Paul says, love you. So I say, love you. We'll see you at the next reading.